This is Abe Friedtanzer from Awards Buzz, and I'm very excited to be speaking with Alison Brie about Apples Never Fall. How are you, Allison?
I'm good. I'm good. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Can you tell me what intrigues you most about doing this show?
Well, I've talked a lot about the Annette Bening of it all. I'm a big Annette Bening fan and a big Sam Neill fan. So I think hearing that those two were attached felt really exciting. I think when I'm looking at work, a lot of the time I'm thinking about working with a great ensemble and working with actors that I admire. So that was something that was like a nice headline that came with the project. But ultimately, it was about the character and it was reading the scripts. And if I'm being totally honest, it was reading the third episode of the show. The show is um, sort of organized in a way where we go character by character. Each character gets their own episode, but also it's a true ensemble show and everyone's stories are highlighted throughout. But each character gets their episode to delve a little deeper into who they are and their secrets and what makes them tick. And episode three is the Amy episode. And I just found it really moving, I guess. I really connected with it. And it also kind of scared me. I felt like there were sorry, parts of Amy that sorry, I'm getting a crazy echo in my headphones all of a sudden, and my own voice is like distracting me.
Oh, I'm sorry. It sounds great to me.
Okay, I'll just power through. There were parts of Amy that were revealed in that episode in which she had to be incredibly vulnerable and emotional, and I think I connected with those parts and identified with things about her, and sort of also felt that maybe those were sides of myself that I haven't ever really shown in a performance before. So it intrigued me and it scared me, and I think it's good to do things that scare you. I feel like that's how we continue to grow as artists and go like, "Ooh, wow, I haven't done a scene quite like this before. Let's see if I can."
Well, you hit a few different things I want to go back to. The first is I'm sure Annette and Sam are lovely in real life, but part of the appeal of this ensemble is that no one really gets along. So I'm curious what it's like to work with a bunch of great actors when you have to have such a sort of uncomfortable relationship on screen with just about everyone.
Well, the good thing was that they were lovely. They are two of the warmest, coolest, most fun people that I've ever gotten to work with. And the whole ensemble really clicked immediately, especially the Delaney family. We were all texting each other prior to even going to Australia. So we sort of like started to have this rapport ahead of time. And there was just a genuine chemistry. We had so much fun. I think that helps. I mean, of course, you want to be comfortable with the people that you're working with, but especially in this case, yeah, it was a lot of sensitive material, a lot of dramatic scenes, and a lot of tension. I think when you trust the people that you're working with, then you have the freedom to really go hard in those scenes and open up. You guys have an understanding of what you're doing together. And because of the ensemble nature of this show, there was something that I found really beautiful about the filming of it was the ebb and flow of sort of which character was in the spotlight and the way that the ensemble had to constantly be sort of morphing, and like adapting to one another and what the scenes were based on the dynamic. This scene is about Troy and Stan and what they're fighting about, and we're here to support them as actors and as characters emotionally, also to be bear witness. And that was just kind of beautiful. And I felt that support, in episode three, shooting in other scenes, like from my castmates, sort of being like, today is not our day to be in the spotlight, but it's our day to be here for you and support you and push back in the way that our characters are meant to. And that made the whole thing really gratifying.
I'm not sure that you'd want to emulate or really be like any of the characters, but do you think that if you had to pick someone, it is Amy, or is there someone else who sort of is closer to the real you?
Absolutely, it's Amy. If I had to pick somebody, it would be Amy. Is she close? Is she closest to the real me? I don't know. Probably, honestly, because the rest of the characters have too many issues. I love that Amy you got to give Amy credit for being a communicator. She's not always the best communicator, but she's possibly the only communicator in the family. She seems to be the only person who's like gone to therapy and is actually investigating why she is the way she is, why the dynamics in their family are so fraught. And she's the only one who wants to talk about it. And I think that is a good quality.
That's fair. And you said also this was, not the kind of role that people necessarily expect from you. And I do think that's true, but I also think that this is the role you would play, if any, on this show because it fits with some of your past characters.
Thank you. Yes. Well, also, I think what was fun is that there are ways that I connect. I'm not quite as spiritual as Amy, but I have that in me. I have an affinity for cannabis in me, like Amy does. Like there are parts of Amy that I do click with that people just don't think of me in that way. You know what I mean? Because of the roles that I've played before. But there's some overlap. And I went to art school. You know what I mean? I feel like I also knew a lot of people like this. So I had a lot of good archetypes to choose from that I've spent time with.
I think what I most sort of flash back to is your very memorable, if somewhat small, role in Promising Young Woman, where it's somebody who's like sort of living a happy life and everything, and then just sort of goes to this sudden shift when she has her unfortunate, run in with the main character from that film. And so that sort of, because I think there's a lot of comedy that you've done, which is great, and this sort of the shift from like sort of entertaining character to suddenly sort of this utter devastation at some points.
Thank you. I mean, at face value, I don't see a lot of overlap between Amy and my character in Promising Young Woman, Madison, I believe her name was. In the original script for Promising Woman, Young Woman, her name was Allison. And Emerald was like, I think we should change the name. At first, I was like, why? And then later, I was like, yeah, I don't know that I want to be associated with this woman. But I do see what you're saying. I think a lot of my career, I feel like a lot of the roles that I play give me opportunities to kind of flip back and forth between comedy and drama. And that probably, dates back to my first jobs on Mad Men and Community at the same time, really getting to flex those different muscles. It's fun now to get to do that within one role.
And those two shows obviously have huge but very different, maybe slightly overlapping fan bases. I don't know, but I think Mad Men has sort of launched a particular era of TV, whereas Community never got quite as mainstream as perhaps it needed to, which is also what makes it its own like unique cult thing.
Definitely very fervent fan bases for the two. I'm sure there is some overlap, but you're not wrong in that, like, if people approach me about the shows, it's very firmly feet are planted in one or the other. Trudy, or Annie. But God, God love them. I mean, our Community fan base, they kept the show alive. I think they're the reason that we got 6 seasons. They're the reason that we're gonna hopefully make a movie. So we love them.
And then there's of course Glow, your other big, big TV role, which another show that I think probably could have gone on for longer if not for, the way the universe works sometimes. But also I'm sure has a very energetic group of fans.
It does. And the cool thing about doing a show on Netflix, or even just the cool thing about streaming shows these days, is that fans have the opportunity to connect with shows even after they're canceled. I have to say, I feel like in the last 2 years, since Glow has been canceled, more than ever, people are stopping me to tell me how much they loved Glow and how much the show meant to them, and lamenting that it's ended as if it's like a brand new idea, even though I'm like, oh, I processed that information almost 4 years ago. But I appreciate it so much and I love it. I think, I mean, with Community too, Community went up on Netflix during the pandemic in 2020. And I feel like we got a whole new fan base at that time. Like a lot of younger people who didn't watch the show when it was on NBC were introduced to it via Netflix. Now it's over on Peacock. But like just the ability that people have to stream these shows, I think is great. It's so nice for the work to like live on. Of course, then, sometimes they just get and you're and that's sort of like out of our control. So that's scary. But in the meantime, I've been really enjoying that work is still out there and people can still see it.
I also saw you recently, not so recently, in an episode of Roar, which is another show with a great cast, but unlike this one, you never get to interact because it's an anthology, so you only get, like your episode. What is it like being part of something like that?
That was so cool. I mean, that show was created by Liz Flahive and Carly Mensch, who created Glow. And we shot it, I don't know, I don't know, maybe 6 months after Glow had been canceled. And because Glow was canceled during the pandemic and during lockdown, none of us could see each other. So there was a weird, I mean, I would do anything with Liz and Carly. I think they are so talented. I love the way they work. They sent me the episode, and I thought it was really fun. And another thing I've never done, which was play a ghost. Like an interesting, even tonally, seemed sort of interesting and a different kind of character. That woman was different before she passed away. I love what they have to say also as writers, and I love how unabashedly they just like headline feminism in their work. So all of that was appealing, but it was fun then to get to the set and see so many crew members from our Glow crew. I think that's what made it really special. And even Chris Lowell was in the episode with me, who had of course acted on Glow. So like I felt like that part of doing Roar, I realized you were asking about it artistically, but for me, part of what made it great was getting some closure almost from the Glow side. But it was also fun, even not being in episodes with the other women who were starring in the show, you still felt, I think, a collective energy. I think, I don't know, that we were all, because it was such a female driven, female forward show, and Glow was that way too. I felt like I could feel that energy emanating while we were making it, even though I wasn't on set with all the other women.
Nice. No, I mean it's always interesting to me. There's so much stuff out there, and so many times that you'll work with the same people, whether in front of the camera or behind the camera, and it's always interesting to find those connections, year after year. So I'm all artistically is great, but I like those kinds of stories also. I think they're just as interesting.
Oh, good.
So one film that I saw you in recently is, I think, considerably less serious than most of what we've been talking about, which is Spin Me Round, rare, culinary comedy. It seems like that was just sort of, a lot of fun to make. Could you share any memorable experiences from that process?
That was really fun to make. I co-wrote it with Jeff Baina. It was really based on his idea that he had been working on for, I mean, a couple of years. I feel like he had this idea, and we had written the film Horse Girl together and had such a great experience working on that. So he was sort of like, what if we flesh out this idea I had about, yeah, these sort of like I was going to say mid-level chefs, but I don't know that they're that. It's sort of like more like, a corporate chain restaurant people. It's like you're winning a contest to go to Italy basically, and we just got to round up a lot of our friends that we've worked with before, and some new like Molly Shannon and Fred Armisen and Aubrey Plaza, and some new faces like Aidan Mayeri, who's so funny, Zach Woods, Tim Heidecker. It was just like a murderer's row of amazing comedic actors. And we went to Tuscany at the tail end of the pandemic. And so it was like tourists weren't really even being allowed into Italy yet at the time. We were shooting. I just remember going to the Leaning Tower of Pisa because we were staying 10 minutes away, and it was very chill. It wasn't like crowded with tourists. It really felt like we were some of the only Americans there, which made the whole experience kind of surreal and spooky and fun. And that was another great, yeah, just like a really great fun group. It was the first time I've done 4 films with Jeff Baina, and that is the only time that we actually wrote a script and wrote all the dialogue. The other 3 films that I've made with him were improvised off of an outline, so that was sort of different. But yeah, it was really fun, and it was such a fun idea of Jeff's, and I really admire the way, I've loved working with him, and admire the way that he keeps overhead low. I think he has great artistic integrity, and when I've worked with him, it's been really fun to sort of follow ideas to wherever they might go. And there's no, because these are tiny independent films, you're answering to no one. You know what I mean? You really have the artistic freedom to like follow these ideas through, and we had a blast doing it. And I love the result.
Also certainly not what I would have expected. I saw Horse Girl at Sundance, and so it's like this is not at all. They're very different. I think Horse Girls also feels very different to me than anything we've talked about so far today for what you've done.
Definitely, definitely. Horse Girl is it's very near and dear to my heart, that film. It's the first thing I had ever co-written, and it so many parts of the idea had been in my mind for a long time, and thematically deal with mental illness and my family's history of mental illness and my own, sort of my own delving into that and working through that through the process of making that movie. And it really was one of the most artistically satisfying projects I've ever worked on. I think because, again, just talking about the way that Jeff works, and he was really shepherding me through my first time writing something, and giving me permission to come up with things that were pretty out there. I think also I was nervous to talk to anyone about that idea because it sounded strange, and we mix a lot of, there's some cloning, and we talk of aliens. I remember saying aliens to somebody on my team on the phone, and they were like, I don't know if I follow. And I was like, never mind, I'm embarrassed. So it was fun to work with Jeff and kind of know, that it was like a safe space and no judgment. And I feel like really we were tapping into something, a deeper journey about mental illness, but sort of doing it in a oblique way, I suppose.
It also was not my first Sundance experience with you. I was in the front row of the Eccles at the premiere of Sleeping with Other People, which was now like
Oh.
almost a decade ago, right? I just think that's like a fantastic romantic comedy that seems to have gone under the radar. I don't know that people talk about it as much as maybe they should.
Underrated. I agree. But I wonder if that recently went up on Netflix or something, because that's another one that's had like an uptick recently. Or when Dave and I we were doing press for our film, Somebody I Used to Know, last year, and because that's romantic in nature, I feel like when we were out and about talking about that, a lot of people would say, a rom-com that I love, Sleeping with Other People. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's great. I agree. So good. Leslie Headland, an early film in her resume. And I loved working with Leslie. I loved working with Jason. It was yeah, it's pretty edgy for a rom-com, but I think it really holds up. Yeah, it's underrated, I think, if I may say.
I also think the Ted Lasso of it all might have helped because it's a very different performance from Jason. And I feel like even though he was definitely known before Ted Lasso, unlike most of the cast, like that's a little bit of a surge in
Then it,
popularity that probably had people combing through
then
his
he became
filmography,
America's sweetheart. Yeah. He
which he
became
is not
America's
in this
sweetheart, and
film.
everybody was like, let's watch everything he's ever made. And then they were pleasantly surprised, maybe. Yeah, he's not, but he's so charming.
Too. So, is there anything that you haven't tried yet, acting wise or directing or something like that, that you really would like to try sometime soon?
I would like to direct a film. I've directed a little bit in television, and I would like to direct a film. I'll say that aloud, but I don't have there's nothing legitimately percolating. It's like I have to say it to myself like 100 more times, I think, before I'm gonna go ahead and do it. But I just co-produced a horror film with my husband that we starred in together, and I was excited to get back to horror. Horror is a genre I really love, like real genre movies. I think even I feel like I haven't tapped so much into like the sci-fi space, the action space. Like it interests me just again about flexing different muscles, and certainly for horror and sci-fi, you can explore themes in really interesting ways. You can sort of like push the envelope of what viewers, I don't know, can handle. um, I think in horror, especially recently, we've seen some of like the greatest work, like real art is being made in that genre where yeah, people can just explore things and maybe just take them to like the most intense possible place, and people are along for the ride because of the genre. So I really like that. And that was kind of the case, I think, with the film Dave and I just shot. I feel like we were in the middle of shooting. I was like, I just want to do a horror movie where it's crazy and it's edgy and it's nobody knows what's going to happen. And Dave was like, we're making that now. I was like, you're right. This is great.
Well, it sounds like you're really open to a lot and have a very positive attitude about trying new things, which is great. And obviously, here at Awards Buzz, we love awards, and I'm curious if there is a show or a performance that you think right now is particularly awards worthy.
Ooh. Um, oh, this is interesting, interesting, interesting. Well, okay, I have two. Um, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, I think excellent. I mean, Donald is so fantastic on the show. And I think Maya also is just extraordinary as an actress. Like, I loved her work on Pen 15, and that was just like the funniest, right, most imaginative show. And to see her on this, the show is so sexy. I think they're both giving incredible performances. I love everything about that show. And also, Shogun. I've been watching this show, Shogun, and I feel like high production value, beautiful. The performances are incredible. Like, just the show as a whole is incredibly captivating. And if you told me that I would be obsessed with a show that is about like the feudal struggle, power struggle in the 1600s in Japan, I think I might be like, is that going to hold my interest? But it really does. It's, I feel like the writing is incredible, and the performances are great, and I'm riveted. I actually, I feel like I think I have one more episode to go, and I'm kind of can't wait to dive in.
Those are great choices. And I feel like before
Thank
I
you.
let you go, I have to just ask if there's anything that you are allowed to share related to Community, because I think there are some real fans out there who would be like, how could you talk to her for so long and just mention Community for a second?
Of course. And is what is the question? Are there updates to share?
Yes, that's the question.
Well, there's not. There really aren't updates to share. I mean, we got a script for the movie, so we've all been reading that and digesting it and talking to one another about. I guess it feels more real than ever. We sort of got some dates, but then the dates got pushed. So it's just a classic. Now we're recalibrating for the new dates. Um, but it's been really fun the last couple of weeks, actually, since we got a script to all be kind of like back on the phone with each other again. And like, I don't know, I get so nervous with Community stuff because, the nature of everything we've gone through with that show and our ups and downs, and the idea that we would actually make this movie. It's like I don't want to let myself believe it like the fans and then be heartbroken if it never happens. So I have to keep it slightly at bay, for my heart. So even now there's like a small amount of skepticism, but it feels the most real that it's felt so far. And it was fun to like be on the phone talking with each other about certain scenes and to imagine, it's very nostalgic to read and to read the voices of these characters that we played, I don't know, 12 years ago or longer. And it's it warms my little heart. I love it. I love being on the phone with Danny and Joel, and kind of starting to imagine getting to be on set with them again is really exciting.
I think that is a great update. That is factual and optimistic and not spoilery. And I think you did great.
Thank you. Thank you. You're only going to get optimism with me, Abe.
There we go. Well, thank you so much, Allison. This was a real pleasure.
Likewise. Thanks, Abe.